Loud. All right. I am Sam, and I am here with Stef, the founder of the Insight Studio, as well as Paler, co-owner of at least 3 companies, angel investor, and mom. And I wanted to interview her today for International Women's Month and to highlight some of the awesome work she's doing. So welcome, Stef. And one of the first questions I wanted to ask you to give our viewers a little background. When you think back to your journey, was there a moment or interaction that kind of propelled you forward as an entrepreneur?
That's a good question. And I think like a lot of entrepreneurs, it's hard to say if there was a moment or a movement throughout my whole life. I think about way back when my first kind of entrepreneur endeavor was starting a knitting class actually in college, where I recruited a bunch of women and to take this knitting class. And I got the local bead shop owner to let me use her space for free. And then instead of letting them buy the yarn, I like sourced my own yarn and sold it to them. And then really, I never really thought I was going to become an entrepreneur. I actually thought I was going to be in sports marketing. That's what I was doing in college. But what happened was I ended up having to stay in Missoula because my husband had a family business here. So my dreams of kind of moving back to China were shot down a little bit. And I would say that I became an entrepreneur out of necessity, but I do have a moment. So one of my first business, Mile 22 Bags, came out of a hobby I got into while training for an Ironman. I started sewing purses. I signed up for a sewing class locally. I had grown up sewing a lot. Like I'm a Utah girl at heart. So sewing's like in my DNA. And I made this one bag out of my husband's race memorabilia from Boston Marathon. And I went to lunch with a professor of mine, Mike Braun, out of the University of Montana. And I remember sitting at Mackenzie River and talking to him about this bag that kind of felt like trying to make money out of a hobby, and him kind of pushing me to think bigger. And I clearly remember that moment because it was that lunch I had is what got me to like, I went back to my office and bought an expo booth at the Las Vegas Marathon. I maxed out my credit card to do it. And I really don't think I would have done that if I hadn't had that like lunch experience with this professor that I really respected and cared a lot about, like his opinion of me, and him kind of saying like, no, I think you could go do this, kind of pushed me to take the leap.
And how did the expo turn out where you were selling these bags?
I mean, it was horrible in a lot of ways and fantastic in other ways. I recruited 2 of my best friends to go with me at the time, and we got, the cheapest hotel room we could get. And I thought, well, even if this doesn't work out, at least we'll have a lot of fun. And the expo was 2 days. And the first day, it was horrible. Like I couldn't get the credit card machine to work to actually sell bags. And I just remember sitting in like the hallway of this marathon expo, which is huge, like crazy amount of people. And I was like on the floor calling my husband, like, this is so horrible. What am I doing? And it's classic entrepreneur journey, because then the next day I figured out the credit card machine. We had a crazy amount of visitors to our booth. I ended up selling 75 bags in one day. And then I was like on, the entrepreneur high. So I felt that roller coaster pretty much from day one.
Wow, totally. I can imagine that. And curious, did you sew all of those 75 bags?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
For a whole, for 8 months, I would purchase on my credit card an expo booth at like the biggest marathon that was that weekend.
Okay.
I'd haul all my stuff there. I'd be there Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I'd return home while the marathon was happening. And Monday through Thursday, I was sewing bags in my basement. It was crazy.
Okay, we need a picture of these bags because I'm super, super curious of what these things look like.
Yeah, I have one. I'll send you one. They're actually very cool. In fact, I just hung one in my garage in front of my car, because I
Yeah.
kind of feel like I'm in an entrepreneur like moment in life again. And I love just like seeing it every time I go to back out of my garage and kind of remembering the work.
Is the bag that's hung up, does it include some of your race memorabilia or
Yep.
what? Okay,
Yep. It has a bunch of my race stuff in it.
awesome. Yeah, I would love a picture of that. That would be great. Um, okay, so one of the next questions that I'm curious about is what values have you held over the years? And even thinking about kind of beginning in this, not, I mean, I love the word scrappy, but like, starting making bags and then doing this expo and then now where you're at now, have your values shifted and also what's remained the same?
Sure. Well, I think the word scrappy is very appropriate for me.
I love that word.
Yeah, I appreciate the word scrappy and hope that that rings true forever for me. It's interesting. I'm thinking about that, and I think there's been some values that have held true, but I also think that there's been pressures along the journey to change my values. And a few times I've tried, like there's times when your businesses get bigger or you have more going on or more opportunity where you think like maybe my values are too amateur or not good enough for the big leagues and I need to change them. And I've tried to have more layers in between me and my staff and have this like structure value or other things like that. But at the end of the day, I keep coming back to kind of who I am. And I'll say now too, now that I've had a few successes, I'm more comfortable with my values and just being like, nope, this is who I am. It might not look the same as some other business owner, but that's okay because I don't want to be some other business owner. And so a few of the values I would say is scrappy. Like I am meant to be in startup mode. Like if I get out of the phase of scrappy, I pretty much check out and it's time for me to sell. Like I'm not a great operator. Scrappy is for sure my thing.
Yep.
Other things too, I think relationally, I have some strong values around, we're all humans first and then employees. And so that's always been really important to me. Like if someone doesn't like working for me or a company, it's like, oh, let's like find you something better because life's too short. And we all just need to like what we're doing at the end of the day.
Right.
But then one other one that kind of comes to mind in the human element is I've always had a strong value around following my energy. And I don't know how to define that for some wall, but I think I hold true in the way I manage too is I really believe that like where my energy is at any given time is the best place for me to spend my time because when you have excitement behind what you're doing, you just do better work. And I think that also comes through in like how I manage people when I think about like, oh, what should this person be learning or how should they be developing? To me, the best answer is always whatever they have the most energy in, because we just perform so much better when we're following that.
Totally. Yeah, and I've actually been thinking about that and curious, you know, when you do hit a block or you kind of feel stuck, like what are some of the outlets and the kind of creative wells that you'll step into to maybe refresh and kind of get a more objective outlook?
That's a good question. I actually have that happen to me, I think, quite a bit. Like I'm an extremist, just in my nature. And so when I'm productive, I'm like hyper productive, like all hours of the day, can't stop, everything I do. I pound out a lot of work. And then I also have moments of I just have nothing in me.
Mhm.
I used to like push through those moments and do really horrible work and feel burnt out. But for me, it's more about like seeing it coming. Like self-awareness is really key for me and allowing myself that freedom to not be motivated that day. Like I mean there are times where I just need to like disappear for a few days and the main thing I need is to like not see Slack or email or whatever that is. Because I know that it's like I could feel it and my self-awareness is there that it's like if I don't check out, it ends poorly. So I really think it's probably about self-awareness and then just allowing myself that freedom to step away, knowing that the energy will come back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. The kind of monitoring of like, okay, fatigue is coming, or like, they say when you're thirsty, you're already somewhat dehydrated. So like noticing those kind of signs and getting in touch with that. So that's great. Yep. Speaking of energy, the next question I have for you is, what's the best investment you've ever made? And I have a really hard time sometimes with those, like, just give one answer. So feel free to, if you have a couple things that stick out to you, and this can be, monetary, lifestyle, time, or energy. But thinking about like what feels like some of the best investments you've made.
Yeah. This one's really easy for me because I've been faced with it quite a few times and have had forks in the road to make this investment. My best investment has always been betting on myself. I feel like along my journey, I've had opportunities in front of me, great opportunities that involved not betting on myself, like getting to a point where I'm working with a company and have an amazing job offer, ownership on the table. And it's usually whenever I hit those moments where there's a fork to go down a path that seems like a really good path, but doesn't involve betting on myself or going my own way, I always jump ship pretty quickly at whatever the thing is and bet on myself instead. And then even like later, I feel like I've had moments of, opportunities come along to invest in a really cool company, to be more of an angel investor or something. And to me, I'm always like, well, if I'm going to spend that kind of money, I would rather spend it on something I build, because I know that I'm a pretty hard worker and I like to see things come through. So I'm a big believer in betting on ourselves in life.
I love that. And around this concept, betting on yourself and kind of investing in yourself and building yourself up, do you have like a team of Stef where it could be like a business coach, or like who do you surround to be on team Stef to keep the stakes high for betting on yourself?
Yeah, that one's been really hard, because especially like relationships come and go, different phases and whatnot. The steady one's been Joe, my husband. He's essentially mentored me in business since I was in college. He's always on team Stef. I'm pretty like, I almost to like a concerning degree that I'm like, wonder like, oh my God, if I asked Joe to shut down everything he's doing to come and like go on some wild journey with me, I think he might do it. So I almost have to be careful with that one. Totally. But that one's so important, right? Because when you're a wife and a mom, like it's really hard to be an entrepreneur if your spouse partner isn't kind of on your team.
Right.
But then I've had some good friends along the way that just make me feel very normal around them. One of them, I think Michelle of Vim and Bigger really comes to mind. Like it's so nice to have someone in Missoula that when I hang out with them, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not an alien. Others like me exist and think this way. But I would say, I only have a few people, but that's okay with me. Like you only need a few.
Totally. Yeah. And it sounds like they're pretty dedicated. You almost have to realize how much power you have with them. Yeah.
Yes.
Cool. Okay. So you briefly touched on a failure on your journey as an entrepreneur, or not even a failure, but a hardship of like the credit card machine not working. And I think that these moments are defining in our professional world and also in our personal world. So how has failure or an apparent failure set you up for later success? And do you have a favorite failure of yours?
So many failures. There's so many failures. And well, one, I like that I'm finally at a spot where failures don't make me self-conscious, and I just realize it's part of the journey. But I have a theme failure of just jumping in too quickly to things, and then being like, whoa, how do I back out of this? Like, I just created a company because I didn't think through it. That's been a theme for me. But the one that really comes to mind is massage envy. Amazing people brought the brand to the state of Montana, opened two awesome locations filled with really awesome employees. And I jumped in really quickly to that. Like I was a brand new mom. I was home like 2 months going crazy. And like one day I was like, I got to find something to do. And to me back then, doing a franchise seemed like an easy option. Turns out it's not. But the failure was really in not doing my research, because at the end of it, there wasn't a values alignment between me and the brand and how I like see the world and serving the world wasn't there. I thought it was there because I definitely believed in like the healing power of massage and like wanting the access to massage to be available to any person that could, and at an affordable rate. But I would have seen that I was a misalignment for the brand if I had done more due diligence. And that failure really led to a hard decision of me getting out of the brand and selling, because I was seeing that, I was in it for 7 years, and by not exiting, I was really stuck and not allowing myself to go out. And so, I probably didn't get the most amazing exit I could have if I held on until that sweet spot of selling a franchise, which is usually around year 9. So, I mean, and then COVID happened, so maybe I was fine, but
Totally.
I made the decision knowing that it could be a bad one, and knowing that, that was a mistake on me. I did well with it. I didn't do awesome. Like, there's a lot of amazing employees I had, and I probably let them down the way I exited, but I learned a lot from that. And I definitely slowed down more as a result.
Mm. Yeah. And I've heard, in various conversations, this kind of highlighting of values, whether it's investors, whether it's the companies you're investing in, as a franchisee owner. And it sounds like you listen to your value of staying true to like what mattered to you by leaving kind of that
Yeah.
partnership.
Yeah, which is sometimes really hard, especially when you're in like a good business model that's just not a value fit. It's a hard decision.
Yeah. So I want to get into a little bit of Paler, which is the company you founded. Is it? Oh, it's a little over a year old now, right?
Yes, yeah, we made the amazing decision to launch Paler in the first month of COVID.
we did a
Yeah,
couple launchings during COVID, so that's
yeah,
to the scrappiness, though, I think.
yeah,
So, Paler is a nonprofit that Stef created, aimed to propel women-owned businesses towards growth, learning, access to capital, and services and community. And so, I'd love to kind of understand, what was the inspiration behind launching this, and how has that been going?
yeah. Good question. So Paler, which is the name everyone always asks me. It's the combination of my two kids, Paige and Taylor, put together. Um, I launched it a year ago after kind of a bad experience. I would say I've been super fortunate in the business world as a female entrepreneur, being really young. And in a lot of ways, I feel like I was outside of the norms of what you hear about female entrepreneurship. So much so that when, people would try to involve me in female specific entrepreneur endeavors or nonprofits or whatever locally, I'd be like, and yeah, I'm not interested. Like, I don't even think that stuff's real. But then I had my own bad experience, and I realized, and I don't think this is a bad thing. It's just the reality. I realized that a lot of my ease in business wasn't actually a result of me, but of how much the Missoula community liked my husband, which is great, you know, like super fortunate. But when put in a situation where I couldn't go on his merit, I learned a quick lesson about some of the realities, which sent me down a rabbit hole of really understanding the dilemmas of female entrepreneurship, the dilemmas in, funding gaps, that how crazy it is that, 42% of businesses in the US are owned by women, but they're only generating 8% of the capital or employing 4% of the workforce, or, that venture fundable concepts are getting less than 2% funding. And now with COVID, even worse. And I was just like shocked by all of this finding. And I was also very angry about what happened to me in my own experience and wanted to do something about it. And so ideally, Paylor was going to be this community for women entrepreneurs to get the support and capital they need to grow. And I think we've done a good job of that. Like, we have some really amazing content and whatnot. But we really just want to have a positive impact. And so right now we're kind of thinking about what that means in the future. And I think capital has to play a role in that. Like, I don't think women need more mentoring programs or content. Like, they're like, give me money. And the example I always use is my husband, has a great idea, wants to start a company. He goes to the bank or investors, they give him money and they say, go. I have a great idea and need money. I go to those same places and they say, why don't you do this mentoring program to learn how to be a business owner? And when I sit back and look at it, I'm like, why does my husband not have to learn how to be a business owner? But I do. Like, and we see a lot of that out there. And so we're really starting to talk more about grants is a big deal for women entrepreneurs, access to capital at an affordable rate. I would say there is access to capital, but women, they're paying higher interest rates because of their credit scores. And so we're really starting to think about, how do we reinvent this system that was built not for women, but actually to exclude women. The big example is how women couldn't even get a mortgage until our lifetime, which is crazy. And so, yeah, Paylor, we are very, very much committed to this idea of how we get women entrepreneurs the capital they need to grow and start businesses.
I love that. And how many members are you guys at now?
That is such a good question. I should know this. I think it's right under 400 members, but we have, we have a content site with a lot of articles, and that is where the majority of our traffic is in all the content.
Totally. Yeah. And you guys do an awesome job of kind of connecting women to workshops that literally take them to step one for applying for a grant or a loan and through the finish line. So it sounds like, that project is really, you're able to kind of combat the system that's excluding women from that. And that's really cool.
Yeah.
So last question here. What's the favorite thing about what you do now? What's your favorite thing about what you do now?
That is such a good question. Well, the thing that comes to mind without thinking too much about it is more how it feels. So I wouldn't say it's like this business or this part of something. I would just say, like, I feel like I'm in a really good phase in life, in that I'm very comfortable with who I am. I'm not creating businesses to impress anyone else. I'm following my passions. I'm doing really cool, innovative things. I'm pushing myself outside my comfort zone and not worrying about it. And so right now, my favorite thing is just being in this season where I no longer, do something and then like picture a critic and what they're going to think of it. Like, I remember when I launched Mile 22 bags, I was like worried what my high school friends would think of it. Like,
Totally.
And I just don't have those thoughts anymore. And so business in general is just really a fun, exciting thing to do.
Totally. Well, yay to that. Love that. Looking forward to, and I think that there's probably an element of like experiences that can nurture that type of connection with yourself and kind of eliminating it's like giving less hoots is how we'll modify that,
Yeah.
And I'm sure over time and experiences really can help kind of shape that, but it's a cool place to be when you feel comfortable kind of taking risks and you feel connected to the values and being like, yeah, well, if I fail, at least I know that it was something that I wanted to do and like I got the experience,
Yep. And I think right now it's a result of getting older. It's a kind way of saying I'm getting older, which is cool. And that, I've heard that, and I'm glad to be in that phase of I'm older now. What I wish I could figure out though is how do we help people feel this way when they're younger? How does a new female entrepreneur, any entrepreneur, get to feel this freedom without it coming with age or thick skin or just being burned a few times and then realizing you really don't care, or that's like the magic thing to figure out now, I think.
Well, and then I'd be like, but is that like rushing the process? Because oftentimes we have to like get burned. I mean, it would be really amazing though if we could have children and we could just be like, here's all of the things that you can just take from me. Like you don't need to go break your arm or do these kind of things, So if you figure out that formula, let me know.
Yeah, maybe it's just talking about it. That actually brings up, around my kids, I talk about these things and failure a lot, it's no joke that there's been a time at the kitchen table where my kids are like, Mom, I think that person hates you in your company. And I'm like, I think you're right. So maybe they're growing up with thicker skin because they're kind of seeing me shrug it off a little bit.
Totally. Yeah. Yep. Paige and Taylor are quite the duo, and I'm excited to see what they do in the world, because you and Joe are great parents and demonstrating that kind of, I think you guys applaud courage versus perfection, which shapes out differently.
Yes.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for letting me get the inside scoop of Stef. Do you have any last imparting wisdom you want to share, or anything else people should know about you?
I don't think so. Pretty simple.
The Scrappy Utah sewing entrepreneur.
There we go. Yep.
We need a picture of the bag.
That's right.
And then I'll leave you alone. Okay. All right. Thanks, Stef. Appreciate it.
Yep.